My name's Wang. I actually worked in the game industry for a long time. So in '93, I graduated in the same class as Mark Andreessen from U of I. So I saw the first version of the web browser while I was in college, and it was literally my roommate and I went to the computer lab, opened it up, and the internet was empty at the time. So that was a while ago, and then I went into the video game industry and started making video games. My first game was called Descent. Worked at LucasArts and Disney, and I went through the game industry I worked in games for over 20 years. So my last job, I actually worked with Nicole Bradford at Blizzard Entertainment, where I was an operations director, as she was, and we managed different regions in Asia, and so we worked together on the executive team. And at the end of that run, I had, similar to Jeffrey's story earlier, I wasn't unhappy, but I was kind of feeling a bit lost and unsure if I could do video games for another 20, 25 years or whatever. So I took a sabbatical and started exploring different mindfulness, shamanic initiations, and just dove deep into the whole space of happiness, wellness, resilience. So that's led me to a lot of deep thought about the different technologies. I studied machine learning and crypto. Like crypto had always been sort of in the background. It never felt never quite clicked for me. But then at some point, it sort of started coming together. So I'll share my journey through that. So, oops. Okay, so right now I'm working on consulting. So I have a small team. We're working on think tank concepts to do a nonprofit think tank to bring in the technologies and the systems responsibly and with wisdom for what's needed for like a global civilization model. So Bitcoin was released about 10 years ago now. It was Satoshi published on a crypto mailing list. And at that time, so that's actually quite a while ago. And in 2013, I started understanding it more, where it's like, wait a minute, this allows us to create a decentralized currency, and we can have transactions without a third party in the middle. And that was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. But then I realized that's actually not the cool part of it. The next stage of crypto, like there was this concept of smart contracts where people can now create decentralized applications, and that started to make my mind think about the possibilities there. But then that wasn't really the cool part either. It went to DAOs. So like the concept of a DAO, there was an original DAO that had all sorts of issues. However, the concept of a decentralized autonomous organization, an organization that can run itself, started getting really fascinating. And if we start thinking about today's systems in a way where we attach a DAO to it, it starts creating some really interesting, we can think about decentralized Uber, for example. And we can think about a car that is a DAO, that's a self-driving car that can, let's say, hire a lawyer, form a corporation, go service itself, pick up customers, hire a driver. And it starts bending the mind a little bit. So like a network participant in a DAO could be something like a self-driving car. But wait, that's not even the coolest part. So now we start thinking about DAOs and DAOs within DAOs, and we can start thinking about massively globally decentralized systems. So just as a case study, my business partner and I started brainstorming, well, what would a decentralized fish market look like, for example, a global fish market? So I didn't know this existed, but there's actually a website that has, I think it's like Global Fish Watch or Global Fish Watch, and they actually are monitoring where like the fishing boats are throughout the world. So you can imagine a decentralized network where we have oceanographers and marine biologists and fishermen, shipping people and customers, where we can have a much more intelligent way to deal with our fishing problem, because we're not very good at it today. So we can think of it as an advancement in the way we organize. So we've been thinking about this model where there needs to be a shift in the way I think everyone in this room is aware of the issues with extractive capitalism. So the concept that we started thinking about, I didn't actually coordinate with Nicole or Jeffrey, but we all have this slide in our decks, and there was Maslow's initial hierarchy, and towards the end of his life, he realized that there was more to it than just self-actualization, but this concept of transcendence. So in Nicole's slide yesterday, I added this part because she also, we're thinking in the same consciousness, I suppose. There's this new system that needs to emerge. So I have a friend, Dave Taylor. He also worked in the video game industry. He worked on early games such as Doom and Quake. And he has this concept of vector money. So vector money, he's basically thinking about multi-dimensional money and using a system of cameras and augmented reality and a blockchain to create a new incentive system, basically a video game. So if we think about our reality these days, it functions a lot like a giant, massively multiplayer online game in the real world. So that was one concept. I started also thinking about, if you guys are not familiar with the work of Daniel Schmachtenberger and Jordan Greenhall, they're doing some amazing research and thinking about complex systems theory and how to mitigate existential risks. So he talks about how anti-rivalry is actually an internal process where we have to work on our inner states in order to have agency in how we interact with the world. And then, of course, Nicole says that the way we should think about the transformative technology is a design intention. And I think that's the most key point here, is how do we design our systems so that we can provide individual and collective wellness in the world. So I was originally going to do a landscape of all of the crypto companies out here, and so some background. I worked in crypto for about a year now, and I joined a crypto investment fund, and what ended up happening was everyone was creating like a token for some specific purpose, and that sort of missed the point of what like the potential of DAOs are. So if we look at the landscape, it's actually extremely complex. So how do we manage like all of these different inputs, outputs? It's more of a complex system than we can fully manage today. So I think the key point is for health and wellness, my personal opinion is that things are still a little bit early in terms of the maturity of these platforms. If we think about Mosaic in 1993, we're maybe like we're probably in, I don't know, 95, 96 of the internet, and it's taken 25 years to get to where we are now. And another example I would say would be Steve Jobs. Like before the iPhone came out, we made games during this period with mobile phones, and it was a nightmare. You had to have compatibility with like 50, 100 different devices, and right now with all the different protocols and technology that's emerging, it's pretty challenging to know which platforms to use, and building your own is probably not really. I mean, there was this ICO craze where people raised a lot of money, but that wasn't really the important factor. The important factor is that these iterations, I think someone said, it's not failure, it's trying something first, or something of that nature. There's a lot of really smart people building protocols with the right intentions to create these decentralized systems and decentralized platforms. So I just thought some of them and like the iPhone, these may not be the ones that ultimately end up being the dominant ones. However, DAO Stack's actually building a stack for DAOs. Ethereum and EOS are working on different governance models. They're all struggling with something called the scalability trilemma. So there's scalability, security, and decentralization. And you can only really have two of those three. So a lot of things are sort of skewing back towards centralization, because that's, well, either centralization or security. I mean, those are sort of the two that are traded off. And then we heard Ben speak earlier today. There's SingularityNet, and there's these different data marketplaces. I'm actually working with Prasaga. They're doing an IoT platform to create interoperability between the different IoT devices, so that we can have much more, I guess, interoperability and data flow within the IoT world. Then there's the Ocean Protocol as well, and they're building a data marketplace. So the last talk was actually about data sovereignty, which is actually a really key issue here, because We know that the value of a network scales as more users are added to it, and in today's world, it's like these are pretty much, all the data collections being aggregated in these centralized entities, and I think these companies get demonized a lot. However, they're really developing some best practices in how to process data, how to deliver algorithms, and I think it's inevitable that like a decentralized version of these services will emerge, and that will actually move the functions of these companies out towards the nodes of the network, so that we'll have more of a, so the different functions like the lobbying or the application process that Uber uses actually can be handled by network nodes rather than a big giant centralized company. And some of these network nodes can also be DAOs, so starts making things. There's some really interesting thought experiments around this. So if we look at the mission statements of these different companies, they're all pretty good missions. And in a decentralized world, having these networks emerge to manage this could be, it could be a really powerful way to think about things. The last talk, they talked a lot about data sovereignty and the privacy issues and the different technologies that are necessary to help these privacy issues and different issues be addressed. So I recommend, we talked about different books. I recommend this book. This book was recommended to me by Jordan Greenhall, and it was recommended to him by Stuart Brand, who he said just one day he was at some event, and Stuart Brand came out of the jungle and said, "You should read this book, Demon." So Demon is about a game designer who dies and leaves behind basically a botnet that creates self-driving weaponized cars, and it gets kind of crazy, like violent science fiction. So I think it's a little bit of a word of warning as well as an inspiration for how a decentralized society can form and how some of the, governance models can emerge. So Stuart Brand, his quote, we are as gods and we have to get good at it. We literally we're getting to that level of power right now. So how do we collectively work together to create sovereignty and wellness? Because I think the inner space wellness is the most important thing today. Like most of the bad behavior or bad actors we see, it's because people are not whole. They're sick essentially. So I think there's both the mindfulness that we need to create as well as the emotional resilience so that people can level themselves up and have agency within the world. So there's a beautiful metaphor that's going around a lot in my life recently, just through various sources, and it's the butterfly. Right now, I think individually, when someone's going through transformation, there's this metamorphosis where there's a cocoon stage, and then we emerge out of that, and the timing of that's really important because if you cut the butterfly out, for example, before it's ready, then it doesn't have the ability to develop the wings, so that it will just die. So I think when we think about mindfulness and wellness, it's also about not just about removing stress, but also about how do we create resilience and strength so that people can have agency in the world to accomplish what we're all here for, which I think is to be part of this beautiful game that we're all playing. So with that, I'm going to bring up our case study of Conscious. These guys are working on technology that can be part of that mission. So,
thank you, Yuan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we got about 10 minutes, and before we dive in, I know that a lot of this has been quite cerebral, so I'm going to invite you to just close your eyes for a second. Invitation, if you feel like it. Close your eyes and just take a deep breath all the way down into your belly. And as you exhale, just realize that you exist. You're here in this moment. This is existence. This is life. Get a sense for that pulse of aliveness. And as you're ready, you can open your eyes with a smile, if you want to.
Awesome. So thank you, Yuan. As you guys can tell, Yuan is almost like a futurist crypto blockchain enthusiast, and we need people like him to kind of hold this faith as everyone, if you're here for the first day. He holds the faith and the vision, and then we need to execute in a very careful kind of manner, especially in this crypto space. So before I start telling you about the story about Conscious, oh, it didn't make it. That's fine. No? Oh.
Yeah, and you left out our slides?
We're conservative. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys, how many of you guys invested in cryptocurrencies? Raise your hand. Awesome, so a lot of you. How many of you are currently working on or planning on incorporating blockchain into your companies? Wow, so a lot of you. And so many of you know that there aren't too many crypto wellness projects out there. There's High Vibe Networks, which is trying to pay people to meditate, which is something similar to what we want to do. And yeah, so let me just tell you about the story about how Conscious, our company, started. So I was working at Lululemon about 4 years ago, and unfortunately, they did a lot more work than they did yoga and meditation, so I ended up quitting that. So that was the end of my corporate career. I ended up diving into 2 different companies. One was as an entrepreneur, obviously. So one was a romance publishing company where I became the highest paid romance publisher in the world. That's a weird story. I got some karma around that. And then the other one was e-commerce. So I became the highest, or one of the top Facebook marketers in the world. So that allowed me to really understand marketing. So I made a lot of money doing that, and now 10 months later, we are working on our passion project called Conscious. So the way Conscious came to be was I went to a business mastermind. It was $10,000, and it was 3 days. We hung out in mansions and yachts and all these fun things. And it was really profit-driven. It wasn't really my jam. I was really helping a lot of the entrepreneurs there from around the world. One thing stuck with me. On the very last day, one of my mentors, Mark Lack, he said something very important. And he said, the difference between millionaires and billionaires is only one thing. And it's that billionaires don't wake up asking themselves, how do I make more money? They ask themselves, how do I help 1 billion people? So that kind of planted a seed. I ended up driving away from that mastermind, meeting my co-founder, Boris. We did a 3-day kind of silent meditation retreat. And with all good meditations, we catch these amazing downloads. And so I caught the download of really wanting to pay people to meditate. And why is that? Well, I think I spent 12 years meditating, basically, traveling the world, asking people of various cultures and religions, what is your crystal clear vision of your life? And then the second question is, what is preventing you from reaching that? And what I see as a common trend in human consciousness is 2 things. One is that they're held back from internally. So they have some sort of mental mind blocks, which can be solved, again, with yoga or meditation, I typically recommend. And then the other one that's holding them back is, if we're really honest, it's money, it's finances. So the common things are, I can't help my family, or I can't travel the world just because I don't have money. And if you know anything about money and you believe in energy, that money is just energy and it's just flowing. So the download comes, and essentially, I want to liberate people on those 2 fronts, spiritually and physically, like through money. And for the first time in history, we're able to do that with blockchain technology. So we're able to create shared value economies. And what does that mean? So it means that everyone in this room, if we share a value, in this case, we're assuming, let's say meditation is valuable, then we should be rewarded in some way, shape, or form for participating, putting our energy and our attention towards that. So how many of you would like to get paid to meditate? That'd be pretty cool, right? Like just to be, yeah? So essentially, if we're able to pay people just to be in a state of being, then I think we're gonna really be able to value. People are really gonna feel valued rather than having to do things. So do we have our slides working? No bueno? Damn, we put so much effort into making this project super beautiful for you guys, but that's okay. So essentially what Conscious is a cross-platform technology. So the reason it's cross-platform is our goal is to reach 1 billion people. We really want to saturate every single market that we can. Not just the meditation market, but also we want to obviously get into corporate wellness. We want to get into games, and we also want to basically be everywhere that we can. And this comes from my marketing background. So it's a cross-platform technology. using something very unique, which is contactless biofeedback. So maybe I can let my co-founder Boris talk about contactless biofeedback and why it's so important.
Sure. Yeah. So what we noticed is when we were thinking about this project, and we wanted to, if we're going to pay people to meditate, we got to make sure that they're actually meditating, right? So, and I know that there's many next steps that we can maybe touch in the time that we have, but to prove that they're meditating, we had to work out something. And so we started working on an algorithm called proof of meditation, as opposed to, as you probably know on the blockchain, proof of work, where it's just about kind of computer calculations. Oh, sweet. Okay. So with contactless biofeedback, we wanted to see what are the biomarkers that would actually show us that a person is meditating. What would their HRV look like, for example? What would their respiratory rate look like? And so as we started to think about this, we of course went to wearables, but wearables create a big obstacle for adoption, because now you have to buy extra devices, you have to buy extra hardware, you have to wear it, you have to remember it, you have to maintain it. So we were thinking, how do we reduce the form factor? How do we reduce that friction for adoption and make this as widely available as possible? And so what we ended up doing is, or perhaps let's pull up the slide. Let's pull up the next slide, and then we can kind of flip back. So what we ended up doing is actually applying computer vision, and this is perhaps for the first time that something can go public and really be on consumer devices, using computer vision to essentially take your biometrics right from your video stream. So as you're looking at your phone, it's actually able to read your HRV. It's able to see if you're in coherence. It's able to tell what your level of stress is, or the opposite, how you're building up your resilience. So maybe let's flip back to the other one, and I want to talk about now the adoption. We heard a theme here in this conference, and the theme is, how do we make technology less visible? How do we make it more frictionless? How do we make it so that we don't have to do something extra, but instead we can have it be fully integrated into our lives, fully useful? And Spire was a beautiful example of that, that Spire tag that they kind of created that you can just put on your clothes. So to that same end, we're looking at these 6 pillars, which are essentially the how of delivering this technology in a seamless way so that it becomes part of your life. Let me decode this a little bit, because each one of these 6 is connected to one of the core drives of human behavior. And that comes to us from Yukai Chao, who's essentially a partner in gamification, looking at what behavioral drives pull the strings that get us to do the actions that we actually really want to do anyway. So starting off with cryptocurrency rewards, which is what Mike was talking about, paying people to meditate, to be rewarded for your efforts. This is just kind of like getting a gold star when we were kids. A lot of this can connect back to when we were kids. Philanthropy. Here, this is really about collective greater vision. The core drive is called epic meaning and calling, to do something for the collective, beyond just the self, to include the whole. The biometrics, the smart progress tracking, this is, again, another core drive of human behavior, because we want to see that we're progressing. That's why actually sometimes people like to vacuum, because you can see, oh, it's going away, it's going away. So that progress tracking, another core drive. The AI biofeedback that we're integrating in this is about that drive of novelty, about the unpredictability aspect of experience. Because we don't want to do just the same old thing each time and just see how it comes out. So with AI biofeedback, what we're talking about here is adapting the algorithm, adapting the meditations, adapting the games to what's actually happening for you, and how are you progressing. And so it's more bio-individual. And of course, novel. Gamification is, of course, doing things that are intrinsically fun, not just doing it because you think you're going to get something out of it later, which is an extrinsic motivation, but making it inherently fun so that when you're doing it, it's like a game. It's something that you want to touch and play. And lastly, social. And social is really about, again, doing it together, which is part of the reason why we're here, that intrinsic connection of bringing it together.
Sweet. So we got 30 seconds. I need you guys' full attention, because we're going to need some of your feedback. So we have a suite planned of 4 products. And what I'd like for you guys to do is email me at the last slide with which product you think would impact humanity the most and where we should place our attention. So I'm going to go through them real quick. The first one is a multiplayer meditation app. I know we have a lot of meditation apps on the market, but just like Boar said, this one allows contactless biofeedback. So this is the first product. The second one is called Conscious Games, and we have a few different games lined up. One is the same thing that many of you guys have picked up in human consciousness, and we're all kind of riding the same wave, is essentially using your biometrics to open a beautiful flower. So that's called Beautiful Minds. Other things is you could race like rocket ships or whatever it is, again, to saturate the market and really capture people that are not just into mindfulness. The third one is a workplace app. I've heard going through the program that maybe we shouldn't start with B2B. And then this one is actually one that we're really excited about, which is called Conscious Plugin. So just imagine a plugin in your browser that's basically telling you how your physiology is reacting to the information that you're consuming. So those are the 4 products. Again, the multiplayer meditation app, the Conscious Games, the workplace app, and the Conscious Plugin. So if you guys could email me, take a picture, and email me with which one you guys think would impact humanity the most, I would be very grateful. So thank you for your time, and God bless.
Thank you.
All right, so just as a recap, like I think my general recommendation as far as crypto goes is definitely get educated on it. These are pretty mind-bending concepts. However, it's going to come like both. It's going to be a phase shift. So it's going to happen faster than we think and slower than we think at the same time. So I would just feel free to reach out to me as well. Just Yuan at quantumpoetic.com. YUAN, and I'm happy to talk to anyone. And if you guys want more details about the more technical side, I'm happy to talk about that as well. So thank you.